Adventurer of the Year. Colin Angus, it took a death-defying trip across the ocean. Now she's written a book.
We were out there in the worst hurricane season in recorded history.
See that? How did that test your relationship?
In this episode of Idea City,
I spotted this rusty ladder coming down the road. I could see 3 policemen. It was trying to be subtle, but they stopped. And the driver leaned out and said, "Stop!" So I stopped and said, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Moscow." And at this point, I was cycling on my own. Moscow is still 8,000 kilometers away. And he just started laughing. He was laughing and laughing and laughing. And his buddy beside him were laughing their heads off. You don't drive your car to Moscow, never mind your bike.
I'm really excited to be here at Idea City this year.
When people first hear about this part of our expedition, the question they ask isn't, well, what was it like to survive the hurricanes, or how did you deal with all that boredom? But how did you survive without killing each other? And fair enough, being on a rowboat for 5 months is unlike anything you'd experience in your daily lives. First of all, it is a very small boat. It has a very small cabin. It's about the size of your average kitchen table. So imagine crawling under your kitchen table with your spouse or your best friend or someone from work and not getting out for 5 months. There might be a few things about that person that begin to annoy you. Well, we are no different, and there's a few things about Colin, and there's one thing in particular, and you see he likes to sing.
My baby and me, alone on the sea.
And now, that might not seem that bad, but he has a very limited musical repertoire. He has 3 favorites. There's Row, Row, Row Your Boat, there's a sea shanty where the boat sinks and everyone dies, and, well, you've heard his favorite.
My baby and me, alone on the sea.
So imagine this, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month.
My baby and me.
So one day, about halfway across the Atlantic, we took a break to go swimming. We would do that every day when the weather allowed. We were always a little worried about sharks, so one person would be on the boat, be on shark watch, and while the other went swimming. So I was on the boat, Colin was in the water. And this was a very precious time for me because this was the only time of the day where I was alone on the boat and I had silence and peace. But not today. The only thing I could hear in my head was, my baby and me, alone on the sea. So that was it. I had it. So I looked at Colin swimming so merrily, and there wasn't a shark in the water, but at the top of my lungs I yelled, "Shark!" And, well, you have never seen anyone move so fast. So he may not be a champion karaoke singer, but for those 30 seconds, he was a world-class swimmer.
Apparently I'm a bad singer.
Really, huh?
Yeah.
But in the middle of the ocean, what's you gonna do, leave?
You can see what I had to put up with on a daily basis on those expeditions. And, when people first see me, they're often a little disappointed. Especially if they've heard of the different expeditions, rowing wild rivers or getting shot at by gorillas, climbing mountains. They kind of expect me to be, bigger, kind of meaner looking. Like a cross between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Clint Eastwood, staring off into the distance, 6'6", built of steel. Instead, it's just little old me. And there was a reporter from the province newspaper, it's a newspaper from Vancouver, who I think was kind of thinking along those lines. He wanted to do a story on our adventures. He phoned me up and said, "Hey, let's get an interview." So the following day, he came to my house, knocked on the door. I answered, he was looking over my shoulders, when I'm looking for Colin Angus. That's me. So we did the interview, and the following day the story came out. I'm just going to show you a little snippet from that article. Angus, hailed as one of Canada's great adventurers, is also one of its greatest nerds. Angus, who stands a pale inch or two under 6 feet, weighs a sparse 165 pounds, looks more like a computer-addled cavefish, a piranha-busting daredevil. Now, some people might be kind of disappointed to see that, offended. But I love it. It speaks to the fact you don't need to be somebody extraordinary to go out and do crazy or wild or different things. You just need to have an idea, a concept, and hang on to it. Have the belief in yourself that you can do it.
It was my birthday, so I called my father on the satellite phone to let him know that everything was okay, and he sounded frantic as soon as he picked up the phone. He's like, "Julie, things are not okay. A hurricane has formed on the ocean. It's right where you are. It's coming towards you." And I looked around. It didn't really look that stormy, and I said, "No, Dad, you must be mistaken." But just to be sure, I called the National Hurricane Center in Florida. Now, these are the guys that monitor hurricanes. They track it. They know what's going on. So I rang them up, and they said, "Oh, yes, a hurricane's formed. It's in an area thought to be too cold for hurricanes to form. It's the most northern, most eastern hurricane in all of history. And yes, it was coming straight towards us." Great. By this time, we're all alone on the ocean. We don't know if we're going to survive. We don't know. Nobody else has gone through a hurricane in a rowboat before. These are storms that have a power to flatten a city, and here we are in our own little plywood boat. And the weather started to change. First it was eerily calm, and then we saw these strange cloud formations, and then the waves started to build. And at first it was just this huge swell. The ocean would lift our boat and gently lower it, and you knew that there was a monster storm. The waves grew from 10 feet to 20 to 30, up to 50 feet. So these are waves that are as high as a 5-story building, and they are smashing against our boat. And we're just careening around like a bottle with a cork in it. And our boat is supposed to be unsinkable. It's supposed to be able to capsize and right itself. But let me tell you, when you're in that boat and you're being shaken around, you're not so sure anymore.
Probably wondering why we had pantyhose in the boat. Still on Friday nights. What else was I going to wear? So, it seems like we're always talking about the times we almost died, or the monotony, or the toil, or this and that. But of course, the reality is that's not why we're out there. We're out there to explore and experience all these different places, meet people in different parts of the world, see these beautiful landscapes. And of course, the Atlantic Ocean is no exception.
Important things is risk management. And that's not only when you're faced with death, immediate death, like if you're lost in a blizzard in Siberia or a hurricane is about to hit you on your rowboat, but it's every day when the risks seem much smaller, because each of those risks, they add up. So we did everything we could to minimize those risks. We wore our helmets, we wore reflective clothing, we hung our food up. And then when we reached northern BC, where there are a lot of bears, we were a little bit more concerned because we had heard a story about an incident that happened on this highway that we were about to cycle, the Cassiar Highway. And a woman was driving, and she had pulled off on the side of the road in the night to sleep, and in the middle of the night she heard this tap, tap, tapping against her window. And she woke up, and she looked out, she didn't see anything, and she didn't hear it again, so she went back to sleep. But in the morning, when she opened her door, she saw there was a dead cyclist there. He was lying in a pool of blood. He had been mauled by a bear in the night, and he had tried to go for help. So it was that story that was playing in our minds when we were cycling this lonely highway, and we had seen bears all throughout the day. And now it was time to camp, and we were looking for a campsite, and we had pulled off the road once, but we had heard crashing in the bushes, so we got back on our bikes, and it was getting dark, and we were really looking for a place to sleep, and finally we found the perfect bear fortress. In a way, that's what risk management is all about. It's not necessarily following a predetermined plan, but it's improvising, using things that you find along the way.
Moscow is still 8,000 kilometers away, and he just started laughing. He was laughing and laughing and laughing, and his buddy beside him were laughing their heads off. You don't drive your car to Moscow, never mind your bike. Finally, one of the guys goes, "Get in the car." Remember, my Russian isn't very good, so I'm like, okay, get in the back of the car. "You must be hungry." And they pull out these jars of borscht and pilmeni and start feeding me this food, which is obviously their lunch. And so we're having a right old party. One of the guys puts a cassette in the player. It's some old Russian pop. And one of the guys procures this big bottle of vodka. And this is Siberia. And it's about 8:30 in the morning, but they love to drink. Vodka? I'm like, no, I've still got 100 kilometers to cycle. Thank you. Didn't stop them, all three of them, including the driver, down this bottle. So we're sitting there just having a party, and they wouldn't let me go until I signed the roof of the Lada. But anyway, it was quite an experience. And that's how Russia was. That's how the world was, actually. There's so many warm, friendly people.
And I think the most important thing that I learned on this trip is that, it is just a matter of putting these little baby steps together. There's so many times when I wanted to quit, and Julie wanted to quit, and we just kept pushing on and just sort of focusing on the short term, not the overall journey, but just make it through the next day. And eventually those little steps added up, and we made it to the end. And I know you guys are no stranger to that philosophy. All of you have done all sorts of incredible things, built up big businesses, and taken on all sorts of risks and adventures of your own. And I'd like to wish you all the best of luck in your own continued journeys and expeditions, and enjoy the rest of your time here in Whistler. Thank you.